Runestones is a fantasy game that combines deck building with set collection. You start with a simple deck and you will make it stronger to acquire more things, and you will use those resources to buy victory points. It is a game with a fantasy setting with very nice production values, and actually, since we're talking about those, let's have a look at the board, which I'm showing you now the way it would look at setup. You have an area there where you organize the cards that will become available for purchase. Here we have runes represented by tokens that will give you different types of advantages, so you stack the different stacks there. Gems, a section for the artifacts that you will build during the game, and a scoring track. The idea is you will buy cards, use cards to acquire gems, they allow you to forge artifacts, and the artifacts allow you to score victory points and to trigger extra actions, by which I mean actually to acquire the runes that will give you different kinds of abilities. Each player also has a personal board, such as this one. What you see here, the symbols, you have to think of them as two separate individual rows, and this symbol here means wild. Now, if you acquire a color artifact, you can only put it on a spot of the same color in one of the two rows if you still have the spot available. If you forge a wild artifact, that is the only one that can go in the wild artifact space, or it can replace any other color. Why are these important? Because in the game you will be able to redeem your artifacts. Simply, it's a free action at the end of the game. You discard artifacts from one of your rows and you gain the benefits indicated here, which are a number of victory points plus always a rune stone. So if I discard 3 artifacts from the same row, I'll get 6 victory points and a rune stone. The idea is if you run out of runestones, you will do this often and then you'll collect a lot of those, but it's not as profitable in terms of victory points as it is if you wait and then you unload a lot of artifacts, but then again you have fewer runestones. Speaking of those, again, these are the runestones that will give you extra powers. Look at these slots here on your personal board that tells you can have up to 4 runestones, and they must be different from one another. You cannot have the same runestone once. We said it's a deck building game, so you start with a simple deck of cards. And what is indicated on top is, well, the money that they generate, the resources that you use to buy new cards. Then here you have a number, which is important for reasons that we will see. Then symbols that tell you what the card does when you use it for its ability, not to buy other things. For example, this one, you see the slash will allow you to either get a green gem or a yellow gem, and different things happen here. And so just to give you a sense, other things will allow you to collect materials that then you can use to also forge artifacts. You may just get victory points, that's simple, gems of any color, and so on and so forth. Now, during your turn, you will take 1 of 3 actions, and then for free, as an extra action, you can exchange your artifacts for victory points and runes. The 3 main actions, however, are summon creatures, fancy word to say you are acquiring new cards for your deck, because they all represent creatures. You can use abilities on cards, or you can forge an artifact, which are, remember, these tokens here. Suppose we want to summon cards. The cost is indicated when I want to summon creatures, buy a new card. The cost is indicated under the card on those slots printed on the board. So if I want to acquire this card, I need to pay any 3 mana from my cards of any one color, or combination maybe of a color and wild, and say I acquired that one, and then, as you can imagine, as it happens in many games of this kind, later you will slide them and you draw new cards to refill the offer there. And that's pretty much how you summon creatures. When you summon a creature, it goes into your discard pile and it'll become available to you when you reshuffle your hand. when you reshuffle the discard pile into your main deck. And now suppose that here I have my hand of cards and I need to decide what to do with them. Instead of summoning creatures, I decide to use abilities on the cards. To do so, I will choose always 2 cards from my hand. Suppose here I have a hand of cards that has a mix of my starting cards, as you can see from my own gloomy druid appearance here, and a mix of other things. You will always select 2 cards when you use abilities. And suppose that I decide to use these 2. Then you simply do what they say, as simple as that. You perform the abilities of both cards in any order. So I collect a blue stone, I collect a stone of any color, I collect green or yellow, suppose it's yellow. What happens next depends on the numbers that you have here. The card with the higher number, in this case, that would be this one because it has 100. The card with a higher number, if it is a creature, okay, suppose these are the cards that I use. If it is a creature, it is returned to the general discard pile, the one that then will form a new draw deck for the off-row cards. So the one with the higher number, if it's a creature card that you bought from there, goes to the discard pile. If it is a druid card, these are the 2 cards, and this is the highest one, then it is removed from the game. So your own cards, your own starting cards are flushed out of your deck because they can be used only once when they are the highest card in the pair. In other words, you always play 2 cards to use the abilities here. The highest one will leave your hand and will leave your deck, either to go back to the general discard pile or to go to the box. And the lower card, and suppose this, so this is removed from the game, and this goes into my discard pile. So basically, you do not have to worry, like in other games, about spending actions to remove cards, your initial cards. They will just disappear gradually and seamlessly by themselves. Next, what you want to do is, of course, you collected all those nice stones because you want to forge artifacts. The cost to forge an artifact is indicated here. Say I want to forge that blue artifact. Then I need to spend the indicated number of stones of the color order of the artifact that I'm forging. To get that one, I need 3 blue. To get this one, I need 2 green. And sometimes, maybe you go for the cheaper one, but the higher ones also, the more expensive ones, also have other benefits associated, such as, for example, 3 victory points immediately. This one here that you can use, you can then spend a set of these stones here to forge any artifact. If you buy this one here, then you roll this die that will give you different benefits. And once this is forged, it goes onto a player personal board, as you remember, and then we simply draw another one randomly and replace it there. This is basically, in essence, what you do. You acquire cards, you use cards usually to buy gems or do other things, and then you use the gems to buy artifacts. You use the artifacts to get victory points and those rune stones, and you continue like this, generating effects and generating victory points until a player has moved their score market all the way past the Throne of Doom, and at that point that player becomes the King of the Forest, the Super Mega Druid, whatever the title is. But in game terms, the first player to reach or pass that spot is the winner of the game. Runestones is a good game if you like solitaire games, so that you're playing the same room with other players as they're playing their solitaire, and if you like somewhat cold games. Again, cold not in the sense of mean, because there aren't many ways of interacting, so there aren't many ways of being mean to other players. Just in the sense that there's a certain calculating element, which of course you have in many other games. It's one of the core elements of Eurogaming. And yet somehow here it feels a little dry, a little cold, really crunching numbers and just, I would say, quote unquote, going through the motions. This is a game that implements Eurogame ideas well, but in a way that we have seen, I believe, in so many other ways. Sometimes when I describe Eurogames, I describe it as a game where you buy something and use it to buy something and then use that something to buy victory points. And that is quite literally what happens here. We've seen it many times. Is there anything wrong in having the idea implemented yet again in a way that doesn't feel particularly revolutionary? But it's the idea that you know. It's the idea that you know. It's implemented through very beautiful components. I love how the components look. But as for the game, it's a little bit unimpressive. I like the originality. My favorite thing is how your deck changes and how it's a deck building, but you cannot get too much in love with your deck because your deck, you're building it, but there's attrition as it keeps being reduced. That I like. That to me is original, is inventive. It opens the possibility of facing different kinds of dilemmas. I really want to use this card, but if I use it now, it's going to be one time. If I wait a little bit more, then I can play it as a lower card next hand, and then I can use it again. Right there, that's a very interesting decision. To me, this is the heart of the game, what makes it interesting. When you pass that, however, when you have activated your actions, it feels a little bit perfunctory. You're just buying this to buy that, to collect this, to collect that, etc., etc., etc. It just feels a little bit cold that way. And again, everybody I played it with remarked on the lack of interaction. Technically, all information about the player's boards is in the open. I can see that that player needs a red to complete a valuable set. But I have my red, so I'm not going to go for those red just to be annoying. So there aren't many real ways of getting each other's way. You may, from time to time, take something that other players wanted, but it's not part of a strategy, nor should it be, again, because going out of your way to take stuff that other people would need, but that you don't necessarily need right away, it's just too costly. It's just too costly. So players are just going to go for their own objectives individually, running on parallel lanes without really interacting from the point of view of gameplay. Yeah, you can chat, you can discuss about the rune stones and the game effects. We're chatting a lot, for example, about the fact that they don't seem to be all that balanced. Some seem to be blatantly better than others, and then of course it starts to be a rush. I might run to grab those runes that are more valuable. What can I say? I like the deck building element here. What do you do with the deck building element, which is totally solitaire? It just feels a little cold and a little too conventional, a little too obvious. So there are pluses and minuses here. The rulebook does an okay, not fantastic job of teaching you the game. Funny thing, I hope you speak French if you decide to read the rulebook, because we were reading the English rules and we had a couple of questions. There were some passages which were a little bit just blurry, just unclear. The language wasn't airtight. And we started looking at the different manuals in the other languages that we knew, and turns out that the French version is a lot clearer. In a couple of passages, it just gives you a better understanding of the procedures than the English version. How did it happen? No idea, but that's what we experienced, and that is what I'm going to tell you here. So Runestones, there's nothing terribly wrong about it. It's just a game that has a great idea. I think it's a great idea when it comes to the handling of the deck element. Around that, what you have is fairly conventional. It's fairly average. Again, that's doesn't have to be bad, because we have a lot of average good games these days, actually, precisely because the game, the culture of gaming is so good that an average game is a good thing. So it's an average game with an above average idea when it comes to the deck building element, but definitely it is solitaire, and in my group that didn't work very well. We were a little bit underwhelmed by that. Other groups precisely like that, they don't like the confrontations, so I think there definitely is a market, there definitely is a target audience for Runestones. An okay game with a really good idea at the core when it comes to deck building.